Now I would like to call Hari from Promantia team. He's a part of the ecosystem since very long, since 2018, and now today he'll tell you why to choose open source products and why to choose even Frappe products. So Hari, over to you.
Thanks, Mahima. Great to see. So many people on a Saturday. I think we got a full house here, so really, really happy. After the last one, right, it's a big step up. So I think if we can get into a group, we can all work together and make this community grow in Bangalore. So I'll just, okay. I'll just talk about Promantia itself. We started off in 2008, and the focus was open source business solutions. Okay, so even when we started off, we were looking to, so I had worked in the enterprise for 30 years at that point, and was looking to actually work with Indian SMEs, and open source business solutions seemed to be the right choice. So over these years, we have worked with multiple ERPs, Open Bravo, Attendo, and of course ERP Next, e-commerce solutions like PrestaShop and Magento, Alfresco as a document management solution. So, but if you look at the business solution space, right, the ERP is the bedrock on which you put other products on. So, one of the things we've actually tried to do in our ERP engagements, a couple of things. Okay, one is make sure we're tied up with the principal, because what a customer requires in a production in terms of uptime and in terms of quality of service and all that, it requires us to be also deeply into the product. So we try to go deep into the product, and also we try to work with the community as well as with the principal. So that's how we focus on. This side? Okay, let me go through little perspective on what motivates us to look at open source. From our perspective, as well as from when we talk to customers or prospects, right? The first thing which comes up is free, right? So free is like it's like a big shining light which attracts all of us. So free as in I can start using it, and that's probably true as well, right? You can start using it you can just download it from GitHub and start using it. But the other powerful thing, I think Baswaraj alluded to it, right, is about the freedoms, the different freedoms, the freedom to change, the freedom to share, the freedom to contribute. Okay, so those are the other important things from what free gives us. And from my own personal experience, what has happened, during my enterprise part of my life, we worked with best-in-class business applications, where they always told us, this is the best practice, and you have to use it. And sometimes this is what, let's say, Citibank uses, and like I used to work in ANZ Bank at that time. So that what's good enough for Citibank should be good enough for a small bank in Australia or whatever. And even when the consultants who are actually talking with us and doing the products, even when they really understood it, it was about workarounds. So that was the freedom I actually felt was missing during my those days, which was the freedom to do the right solution for the customer, because the product would only give you so much, and the customer's needs a little more, and that gap is not easy to do you can do a separate product to cover that separate solution, but that gap is difficult to cover. The other, probably the second concern that we've had is irritant issues that used to be there, which, okay, if at least I had the code, I could have just fixed it, okay, but it is there, okay, and until the OEM actually has the time to pick that issue and resolve it, the customer is stuck with that issue. So that's quality. From an open source perspective, of course, quality could be, there could be a range of qualities, because it's pretty much it's a setup where the people are choosing the product and they are actually, they are building the product on their own. But if you look at a product which is used by a lot, which is developed by a group where there are contributions into it, and there are a lot of people using it, one simple thing that happens is a lot of people are looking at the code. Okay, from that there is something of some quality. That's quality which comes up. And the other part of quality that I sort of see is the quality doesn't just come from the software, it comes from the usability, it comes in the way there's responsiveness on the product, on the community, and those kind of things, and see that more in, what shall I say, more support on that in the open source world. Another part is of course cost. I mean, you could link it to cost. The cost, at least, especially in India, what I see is a lot of users are initially attracted by the free, the zero cost part of open source. But when you look at it holistically, I mean, it's more affordable for sure. But you got to also budget for the things that you need, like in terms of, let's say, you need to make sure you have either internally or through an external consultant or through a company, the skills to actually maintain and run the product. So in a way, one element of the cost is when they need to actually look at the total cost of ownership and make sure that's managed. Innovation, yeah, so there is I don't know, this is a little old one, I think probably from the 90s. If there's an essay called The Cathedral and the Bazaar. I don't know if anybody's, maybe I'm just looking around, I think, yeah, some people would have. Okay, so that's an essay where they talk about, where Richard Stallman talks about a beautifully built, what shall I say, a closed-source solution. It's like a cathedral, like Michelangelo's done the Sistine Chapel or whatever, right? But it is beautiful. It's great to look at. But what an open source product gives is the live energy of a bazaar. There is action happening. There's innovation happening. Problems come and they get solved within the bazaar, right? So one of the things in terms of innovation that happens is the innovation can now happen across the community because the source code is accessible. There's interaction within the community. So especially with ERP Next, I think a lot of innovation happens because of that segregation that they always did in terms of keeping ERP Next separate from the Frappe framework. So, in terms of innovation as well, I see open source as a place where more and more innovation. And I think if you look at what's happening in the AI world, DeepSeek is sort of taking a step ahead of OpenAI, and the products are on that. And so one of the things, because we are focused on open source products, is we tend to do a lot of these evaluations. So I'll just run through some of the factors that we look at when we evaluate open source. Of course, the product, as a customer or as a consultant, right? You need to look at the product initially in terms of, let's say, the product in terms of how fit it is for your organization, but also in terms of how actively it is being used, the commits, the regular commits, the size of the community. I think in terms of the number of, let's say if you're on GitHub, the number of stars, because it sort of shows of acceptance. Even the architecture is important because from a long-term perspective, if the product has got the right architecture, you wouldn't have to changing the product or adapting your solution for the longer term, it becomes easier. Licensing is another factor, and so a couple of points I wanted to talk about in licensing. Of course, there is this completely open source vis-a-vis open source, core open source, right? And the core open source is something like a bait, a marketing bait that happens sometimes, right? So you get a core product which is open source, not always, but in many cases, the basic product is open source, you use it, and then suddenly you find you need something else, you need to go back and purchase a license or buy it from outside or whatever, right? So that is something to be wary of when you're looking at open source. I mean, really is all the functionality that you require a part of the of that core which is open source? Because there are products that I see where the core open source is significant, but many times the core open source gives you something to try rather than something to actually run your business on. The other thing on the licensing is, of course, in terms of the permissive versus the copyleft licensing. So there is so permissive licensing means the product can be used for any reason, right? You can use it for a commercial reason. There's no limitation on using the product, and that happens with a lot of software libraries, and more technical products tend to have licenses like MIT or Apache, which are very permissive. And the other one is the copyleft, which is what copyleft says is that you are using an open source product, you can use it, you can change it, but if you are going to build a product on top of it, you need to make sure that you are also open sourcing it, right? So that is that's something that so when you are building products on top of it, you need to understand. You can use, for instance, Frappe framework is MIT, so you can build closed source products on top of it. But ERP Next and ERP Next is, I think, GPL. And most of the new products are AGPL because, I mean, they're closing some of the gaps in terms of licensing misuse in terms of in open source world. The principle, right? So when I started off in 2009, actually I was very attracted towards open sources which were run by foundations rather than by companies, because there was a feeling that there would be always an incentive for companies to take it towards a goal which may not be aligned to my own goals in terms of open source, having it as open source. But one thing I sort of understand, I mean, so there was one product at that time called OffBiz, which I was quite attracted to because that was run by the Apache Foundation. But one of the things I thought, I sort of realized is that, especially in the ERP space, in technical products that seems to be work very well, but in the ERP space, because there is some, I don't know, heavy lifting which is not very interesting, right? Having a company build an open source product seems to be better. So that's why when we picked up OpenBravo in 2010, it was because it was a company. And then so now it's about you sort of understand the principle. What are their motivations? Do they have a business model which will succeed? So I think at this point, Frappe ticks off in all those points in terms with with cloud as well as Rishabh's this thing on open source, commitment to open source. The product roadmap, that is one thing that, yeah. So that sort of, for me, it actually gives a comfort, right? This product is actually going forward. But every time when we talk about it to Frappe team, okay, I mean, I think I do get it when I talk to people in different, around different modules, right? This is what we are planning to do. But overall, right, I think I sort of understand their perspective also, right? They don't want to put a fetter on innovation. So they sort of tend to keep it open from that perspective, but that's, and the final bit is actually to do a test drive, right? So whatever it is, right? Evaluation is not just reading up something on Quora and doing it. Trying to use the product, try to read the code, try to see whether it fits for you, and then go ahead and use it. So I just had a couple of other related, so some of the challenges from an ERP implementation. How much time I have? You're good, no? A couple of topics. One is on sizing that I wanted to talk about. So sizing is about cost, right? From a customer perspective, the first thing that when they're going to take an engagement, what they want to know is what is the cost of the implementation, right? And so there is a sort of, from a customer perspective, that is very important, right? Before they sign up with you, that's quite important for them to know. But from a consultant perspective, especially in an ERP, what happens is there's a lot of things to be understood about the customer, especially with open source, because of the opportunity to customize. There's a lot of things that that we need to understand in terms of the customer domain before we can actually size it. And I don't want to do it as a pre-sales thing, right? So it's sort of so that is the can I guess it? So there are challenges around that. In this specific thing, right? I know many people actually try to go with a rate-based thing, right? Per day thing. I find the customer argument more valid, because you can't expect somebody to build a house without knowing what the cost is. Okay, so there has to be some kind of sizing to be given to the customer. So we've been also trying to do what can we do to give them some size which we can live by, right? So that has been a challenge for us. Of course, the first thing is to look at the standard implementation, right? Because that is very much like doing an implementation of, let's say, many of the closed source application, right? So you're not making any customization, you're trying to use as much of configuration, training, and data loading. One challenge that we've had with this is customers also very happy because the cost is low, but they don't fully understand what they get with the standard implementation, and then there is a conflict midway through the implementation where they talk about, hey, but I'd expect a product like ERP Next, which is a standard product, why doesn't it have this feature? And what sort of product are you giving, right? So there, the most important thing is to do a very good pre-sales demo, which will pull out information from you can tell them this is what you're going to get, and try and get information in terms of what they think may be other than, maybe required other than what the ERP provides. Once you start talking, right, you can check, you can assess whether this is something that will work for you, that can be configured in the system, or it's an easy customization or more difficult. That is one element. The other one is to actually convince them. So typically a solution definition would take about 10% of an overall implementation cost. Convince the customer, let's do the either just a requirements elicitation where you just look at the requirements and understand the business process and define the requirements, or you look at it because sometimes the customer is already decided on the product, right? He is comfortable with ERP Next. So you can actually define, this is the solution we'll give, this is what will be standard, these are the extensions we'll build, and make it as a paid project. Another thing that we found very useful is to do a proof of concept in terms of tell the customer in terms of what are challenging for you, what are the main pain points. Let's do a focused implementation which covers only those elements, and there are a lot of side advantages in doing the proof of concept. The main thing is you start interacting with the customer, right? And then you build a relationship. They also start trusting it because they see something that is useful coming out of it. And so this has been almost, what shall I say, for a little complex implementation, this has been the most likely path that we've been taking of late in terms of do a proof of concept. The customer also get a better feel of the product, and it's easier to get into the actual implementation. The other thing is range estimates, right? Because as you do more and more implementations, you can actually try to look at, you can look at, okay, this is can have parameters in terms of, okay, there's a manufacturing, medium complexity, okay, what have been the different ranges, give a high and a low, especially early stage conversation. This is, we find it useful because we don't want the conversation to go a lot without having a customer having a sense that what would be a minimum cost. So that is something that we try to do early in terms of for sizing. And the other place that we've stuck and struggled and changed approaches and taken different is around scope management. So you signed a contract and you got the customer onboarded. And then, so we started off in a very agile fashion. We do the workshop, we identify what are the things, we put up a story backlog and start implementing it. Customer gives feedback there. So one of the things that we started doing there is do a blueprint, which is actually define the solution and get the customer to look at it and sign it off, because that would, one is he gets engaged on the process, but and you get feedback also, right? But what about this? You're not covered that, and so you get a more complete solution there, and then you have a better ability to plan and scope and size the overall implementation. Again, not always works, because there are customers who, if you give a blueprint, they don't really read it. So that is probably, but it can de-risk in some way. So it's again something that we actually adapt. So we do lighter ones or heavier ones depending on what's a customer's affinity to see documentation, right? If there are, like European customers, for instance, are very comfortable going through documents and making sure you're complete. So we actually do detailed documentation, and there are other customers for whom we just put it up on Excel, but we still get them to do a review of those the solution and confirm that it's all there, what is missed. Of course, there are going to be a few things, but the idea is to reduce the slippages into the actual implementation. The other thing that sort of, there are a couple of people in the organization, in the customer organization, for us, who are very important to make sure we can complete our, we can manage the scope and complete the implementation on time. One is like an ERP champion, a person who would actually, who is involved in the implementation, who understands the product, and who would, what shall I say, who also understands a lot of the why things are being done in a particular way. And there's a decision maker, right? Sometimes more senior person. So there are, who can help out with, let's say, scope questions or approach questions. Like there are two approaches we could do, which is the better approach. So, and I've seen projects getting stuck because the decision makers are not there, or it's a decision making by committee, which takes a long time. So having these two people identified and making sure your implementation lead is sort of connected with them and driving them is an important part. Phased implementation. One is do minimum implementation, minimum customization in phase one. So you only do so what happens is the customer is also new to the product. So it's quite important that when he gives the requirements initially, right, he may not relate to the product, so he or she. And so it is, so we try to make sure the first phase goes in 3-4 months, but it has minimum amount of customization. And more complex customization which are non-essential. If they are essential, you need them to take them in phase one. If they are non-essential, we can actually move to the subsequent phases, because they are also into the system and they will be able to better give requirements which are more easy to implement on the framework and on top of the solution. Another thing is to empower the customer team members. It's a low-code solution, right? So there would be people there who can do certain things in terms of, let's say adding doc types or adding fields, maybe writing even scripts. So we were a little bit unsure of how to do this, because we also control the overall implementation, right? But what we've sort of come to is allowing them to do it actually binds them, or brings more loyalty to or more affinity to the product. So we let them do it, but we make sure it is done properly by having a code review and committed along with our code. So that is one part of this thing. The other one that we find really powerful is insights, giving customer access to insights to do the reports. At least 3-4 of our customers actually do that. So that's another thing that we try and do. And the other thing is there are cases where the customer also, larger companies, the customer also knows that the full requirements has not come. We have a meeting, let's say, with the IT person as well as multiple main stakeholders. We sit and assess with them what percentage is done. Okay, I think we may need another 20% more, maybe. Okay, then we sort of convince them, why don't you take a budget let's say our quote is, let's say 10 lakhs, why don't you take another 2 lakhs budget and you keep it as a customer bucket, and when you find the scope changes, you can release it. So then you don't have to go back to your sponsor and get approval. So that again, one is they don't have to go to sponsor for every change, otherwise, so there's no resistance on the CRs that we raise. But the other thing is also here, the customer feels, or the customer representative who holds the bucket, he feels in control. So that's also sort of works in some cases. So it's like different things works in different places. So it's a bit of trying out and testing things and seeing what works. So that's on scope management, and that's pretty much all that I had for. So thanks everybody. Still learning on how to make the perfect implementation, but it's still a journey.